Welcome back to Stories of Faith, where we bring the Bible's most dramatic moments to life. I'm your host, and today we're exploring one of history's most suspenseful tales of courage, a story where an entire nation's survival hung on one woman's willingness to risk everything. This is the story of Queen Esther, found in the book of Esther, chapters 3 through 8. But before we meet our heroine, we need to meet the villain, because this story begins with wounded pride and a thirst for revenge. Susa, the capital of the Persian Empire, around 470 BC. The empire stretched from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, countless peoples, unimaginable wealth and power. And at the top of this empire sat King Xerxes, known in Hebrew as Ahasuerus. But our story focuses on the king's right-hand man, Haman, son of Hamdatha the Agagite. The king had just promoted him above all the other nobles. Royal protocol demanded that everyone bow when Haman passed. Everyone did, except one man. Mordecai was a Jew who sat at the king's Gatiya position of some authority. When Haman passed, Mordecai refused to bow, not out of disrespect for authority, but because as a descendant of King Saul, he couldn't bow to an Agagite, ancient enemies of Israel. Day after day, Haman saw this defiance, and it consumed him. But here's where it gets truly evil. Haman didn't just want to punish Mordecai. That wasn't enough. He wanted to destroy Mordecai's entire people in the Persian Empire. So Haman crafted a plan. He approached King Xerxes with carefully chosen words. There's a certain people scattered throughout your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different. They don't obey the king's laws. It's not in your majesty's best interest to tolerate them. Then came the hook. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I'll put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury. 10,000 talents, it's approximately 375 tons of silver. An astronomical sum. The king, not bothering to ask which people Haman meant, handed over his signet ring. Do with the people as you please, Xerxes said. Haman summoned the royal secretaries. He dictated orders in the name of King Xerxes and sealed them with the king's ring. Couriers rushed to every province carrying the same message. On the 13th day of the 12th month, all Jews and old, women and children were to be killed, and their property seized. The decree was irrevocable. The date was set. The countdown had begun. The Bible says the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. When Mordecai learned what had happened, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went through the city wailing loudly and bitterly. In every province there was great mourning among the Jews, fasting, weeping, wailing. The death sentence hung over an entire people. But inside the palace, Queen Esther had no idea what was happening. Here's what you need to know about Esther. She was Jewish, but almost no one knew it. Years earlier, the previous queen had been banished, and the king had held a beauty contest to find her replacement. Esther, an orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai, had been chosen. But Mordecai had warned her, don't reveal your nationality or family background. So Esther had kept silent. And now she was queen, living in luxury while her people faced extermination. When Esther's servants told her that Mordecai was outside the palace gates in mourning clothes, she sent him proper clothing. But he refused, so she sent her trusted attendant to find out what was wrong. Mordecai told him everything. He gave him a copy of the death decree, and he sent back a message to Esther. Go to the king and beg for mercy for your people. Esther's response revealed her terror. Everyone knows that anyone who approaches the king without being summoned is put to death unless the king extends his golden scepter. And I haven't been summoned to the king for 30 days. Think about what she's saying. She was the queen, but she had no guarantee the king would receive her. Persian law was absolute. If she went to him uninvited and he didn't extend his scepter, the guards would execute her on the spot. Mordecai sent back words that would change everything. Don't think that because you're in the king's palace, you'll escape when all other Jews are killed. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you've come to your royal position for such a time as this. For such a time as this. Those words hung in the air. What if her entire life at beauty contest, becoming queen, the years of silence about her identity, what if it had all been preparation for this moment? Esther made her decision. She sent back her reply, gather all the Jews in Susa and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days. My maids and I will fast as you do, and then I will go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. 3 days of fasting, 3 days of prayer, 3 days of preparation for what might be her death sentence. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes. She walked through the palace corridors toward the inner court where the king sat on his throne. Every step took her closer to the throne, remained closer to potential execution. She reached the entrance and stood there, visible to the king. The room fell silent. Guards watched. Nobles watched. Everyone knew the law. King Xerxes looked up and saw his queen standing there uninvited. The king was pleased with her. He extended the golden scepter. Esther had been spared. She approached and touched the tip of the scepter. "What is it, Queen Esther?" the king asked. "What's your request?" "Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you." This is where Esther showed her brilliance. She didn't blurt out her request immediately. Instead, she invited the king and Haman to a banquet that day. The king agreed, delighted. Haman was thrilled to be honored by the queen. At the banquet, the king again asked what she wanted. And again, Esther deflected. "If it pleases your majesty, come with Haman tomorrow to another banquet I'll prepare. Then I'll answer your question." When insomnia struck, King Xerxes ordered the chronicles of his reign to be read aloud. As the servant droned on, they came to an interesting entry. Mordecai had once uncovered a plot to assassinate the king and had reported it, saving the king's life. "What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this?" the king asked. "Nothing has been done for him," his attendants replied. Haman left that day walking on air. He'd been honored by the queen twice. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate still refusing to bow, his joy turned to rage. That night, at his wife's suggestion, Haman built a gallows 75 feet high. In the morning, he would ask the king's permission to hang Mordecai on it. Everything was in place for Mordecai's execution. But that night, the king couldn't sleep. Just then, Haman arrived in the outer court. He'd come early to ask permission to hang Mordecai. But before he could speak, the king called him in. "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Xerxes asked. Haman, assuming the king meant him, suggested the most extravagant honor imaginable. "Dress the man in royal robes, set him on the king's own horse, have a noble lead him through the city proclaiming, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'" "Excellent," the king said. "Go at once. Do this for Mordecai the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Don't neglect anything you've suggested." Can you imagine Haman's horror? The man he'd built gallows for now had to honor publicly, leading Mordecai through the streets on the king's horse. Haman had to shout the very words that burned his throat. "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." Humiliated, Haman returned home and told his wife what had happened. She and his advisors said, "Since Mordecai is Jewish, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." While they were still talking, the king's eunuchs arrived to escort Haman to Esther's second banquet. At the banquet, as wine was being served, the king again asked Esther, "What is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." This was the moment. Everything hung on what Esther said next. "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life, this is my petition, and spare my people, this is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." The king was shocked. "Who is he? Where is head man who has dared to do such a thing?" Esther pointed across the table. "An adversary, an enemy, this vile Haman." Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage and went into the palace garden. Haman, realizing the king intended to destroy him, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the garden, Haman fell on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king saw this and shouted, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" One of the eunuchs said, "A gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house." He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. The king's command was immediate: hang him on it. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman. Mordecai was brought before the king, for Esther had revealed their relationship. The king took off his signet ring, one he'd given to Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. But there was still a problem. Haman was dead, but his decree remained. Under Persian law, even the king couldn't revoke a decree once it was sealed. Esther threw herself at the king's feet, weeping, begging him to stop Haman's evil plan. The king extended his scepter again, and Esther stood. The king's solution was brilliant. "Write another decree in the king's name on behalf of the Jews. Seal it with my ring. No document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked, but you can issue a new decree." Mordecai wrote orders allowing the Jews in every city to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force that might attack them. Couriers rushed these new decrees to all 127 provinces. On the 13th day of the 12th month day appointed for the Jews' destruction, the opposite occurred. The Jews struck down all their enemies. The day of mourning became a day of celebration. And that's why to this day, Jews celebrate the festival of Purim, commemorating the time when sorrow was turned into joy and mourning into celebration. Esther's story asks a question that echoes through time. What if you're exactly where you are for such a time as this? She could have stayed silent. She could have hoped her Jewish identity would remain hidden. She could have let her people die while she lived in the safety of the palace. But she chose courage over comfort. She chose her people over her position. She chose to risk everything, and in doing so, save the nation. Sometimes God places us in positions where we're the only ones who can make a difference. Sometimes the courage to speak up, to stand up, to risk everything, comes from realizing that our entire journey has been preparation for one crucial moment. Esther didn't know when she became queen that she'd one day save her people. She just said yes to the opportunities before her, step by step. And when the moment came, she was ready. What moment might you be preparing for? What opportunity is in front of you that requires courage? What voice needs to be heard that only you can speak? You can find Esther's complete story in the book of Esther, chapters 1 through 10. Thank you for listening to Stories of Faith. If this story encouraged you, please share it with someone who needs courage to step into their moment. Until next time, may you have the courage to ask, what if I'm here for such a time as this?